Greetings to all our learners, all our viewers who are there with us for the lecture. Today we will be learning on the topic of dimensions of globalization, looking at it with special focus on the economic dimension. I am Dr. Amna with you all today, and I teach political science at the Shyama Prasad Mukherjee College for Women, University of Delhi. As we begin our learning, it is very essential to first understand what is globalization. We all know that, like any concept in the political phenomenon, globalization too is a very complex phenomena. Globalization, this is why it is a complex process. And why we call it complex? Because what we witness here is that the world is becoming highly interconnected. When we look at it from the realm of economic ties, when we look at it from the perspective of increase in social connect and ties, rise in various kinds of cultural and political contracts as well. What comes forward is a vision, that is, when we are witnessing right now in the global affairs, that is intensification of global interconnectedness. There is a complex process here, what we say of movement, of mixture, contract, linkages. All of it is presenting to us a picture of integration, interchange, which is why we say there has been rise in global interconnectedness. At the same time, there are witnesses of cultural interaction and exchange. And what is the outcome of it? The result of it is shrinkage in terms of times and space. This is why it is often argued that in the world space right now, distances are becoming shorter. Now, looking at it for all these points, all these issues, we say that globalization definitely is a hallmark therefore in the study of world affairs. Now, this brings us to an important other dimension. What are the causes of it? Namely, as we say, that today globalization has to be perceived as a very integrating phenomena, a process that has led to interconnectedness. Now, to understand this interconnectedness, we go to the roots of issue. We find that because of innovations and development in communications, today ties are cutting across national boundaries. Because of these developments in communication and technology, rise of new forms of interconnections, one witnesses that this has given leverage, this has increased, this has helped in the flow of goods, capital, services, people, information, ideas. When we talk about globalization, we have to see that all these aspects of increase in communication have a resultant outcome of integrating and connecting cultures as well as communities. And at the same time, when we address the idea that is globalization has led to space-time compression, we have to understand it with the fact that today developments in one region can rapidly have consequences in terms of security, in terms of peace, in terms of economic development for other distant regions of the globe. Now, as we are understanding the economic dimension of globalization, Alan Greenspan's quote, that is, there can be no island of prosperity in an ocean of economic instability, brings to us the aspect that globalization in its economic realm is a contested concept. It has led to advantages. At the same time, there are several disadvantages also. And this also brings to us another crucial aspect of this dimension, that is debate on the topic that can globalization be resisted? Can globalization be halted? This is why it is often open to debate from varied perspectives that globalization can neither be resisted nor halted. Now, once we see, when we try to understand deeper of dynamics of globalization from the economic perspective, we see that there is widening of scope of various kinds of global forces to impact domestic policy. There is deepening impact, speeding up of inter-regional flows and networks of interaction. Now, all these processes have an impact on all realms of activity. With intensification of investments, migration, flow of trade, issues of culture, all of it are coming along, are being debated with the idea of speeding up of global interactions. When we look at the globalization from the economic dimension, we have to see that today global transportation and communication systems have what we have discussed in the previous slides, that it has led to blurring the boundaries of what is local and what is global. Therefore, in the economic dimension, what we see here is that because of integration, because of exchange, what we see is complete interconnected globe wherein the distinction of boundaries of territory are being questioned. The distinction of international versus domestic are being rethought upon. This is why it is difficult to differentiate between what is local and what is global. So therefore, looking at the huge impact of global forces, one has to say that these forces are something that cannot be ignored. At the same time, the idea of isolation, there are therefore difficulties for countries trying to isolate themselves from globalization. Again, as we are studying, one has to add in a safeguard valve point here, that results of globalizations have been often contested, and at the same time the idea of integration and exchange that we are talking about is nothing new. It has existed in the past also. However, when we look at the contemporary time, the impact and the scope of the global forces is so rampant, primarily due to the causes of developments in transport and communication, technology, internet, amongst others. That is why today globalization in its economic dimension has a huge impact. Now, when we look at the impact, we have to say that no doubt the idea of market has always been on the premise of development of human civilization. Taking a cue from that, when we talk about free flow of market forces, or the idea that capital is mobile from one part of the globe to other, we see that this definitely offers growth perspectives for the national economies, and at the same time one has to see that this may also come with certain kind of bondages, namely the requirements to implement domestic policies in order to meet global requirements. One of the best advantages that globalization is offered here is that countries are exposed to new ideas, new developments in technology, and as an offshoot of that, one finds that there are job opportunities, there are new avenues of income generation, and at the same time new kinds of technologies are being implied and used in various sectors of the national economy, which all of it has an attempt to reduce poverty also. So therefore, what we see here is that we have a comprehensive mosaic of what actually drives globalization, and in the economic realm there are new challenges as well as opportunities that are being made available. When we look at the fact that today there is an increase in role of multinational and transnational organizations, today when we see that communications are driving forces of industrial development and avenues of economic empowerment for all strata of society. Therefore, from job creation to the larger role of national development, forces that are driving globalization definitely have a significant role. Now, at the same time, the economic dimension of globalization cannot be studied in isolation. We all know we exist within a surrounding. Ecology, therefore, has an important input for studying a process in totality. When we are talking about rampant growth and development, the same time there are issues that are being raised for need for environmental sustainability, because there are concerns being raised. There have been news that have been reported that the kind of impact big business can have on the environment, and if we go by the data and the news, the impact of big businesses and other kinds of economic activities on the environment is enormous. So therefore, there are issues and debate that how do we juxtapose and place together two very important aspects. First, environment sustainability. Second, economic prosperity. So therefore, what we see here is that no doubt because of rampant avenues of globalization factored from the economic milieu, today because of new non-state actors from multinational organizations to various other kinds of non-state avenues, no doubt they're having a far-reaching impact on our lifestyle. Once we try to understand the role of multinational and other large organizations in the national economy, primarily they are given an entry in order to augment the economic avenues and development of the region. Now, increase in consumption of products by them definitely has an impact on the grassroots and the ecological cycle also. Then other aspect, that is increased consumption, leads to an increase in the production of goods, which in turn puts stress on the limited natural resources. Higher productivity only becomes a positive plus or an advantage for the overall economy if output grows quickly enough to generate employment for the entire workforce. Now, at this time, globalization, as we said, that it has led to certain unequal results. With the decline in state and national power, critiques have also raised concerns over the aspect of problem of growth without jobs. How high unemployment has become an issue not only in the developing world but also in the development world. So therefore, there are challenges that are being and queries that are being raised upon the aftermath and the advantages offered by globalization. At one point of time, we say that communication and information technologies have boosted efficiency of our everyday lives, of work-life balance, of ways and mechanisms of on-the-job services. But at the same time, technology is changing every hour, and with changes in technology, the processes and mechanisms that were built on the previous existing technology, or what we can say white collar workers working on previous modules of technology, all of a sudden, with the rise of new forms of information and communication technology, they become redundant. And these are having huge impact on the overall economic mechanism as well as for larger employment scene. Now, when we look at the economic processes today, there is a lot of pressure that local firms are saying it out at the micro as well as the industries are speaking out at the macro level. That is the need to cut labor costs in order to compete in the global market. Then at the same time, today countries are voicing concerns over proliferation of an increase of low-cost imports from low-wage countries, because when we talk about the process of integration and exchange, imports and exports and the tariffs and the balance of payments thereof have to be balanced. And amidst this, there are concerns of low-cost imports coming in the particular country. Then private avenues often work for profit. So therefore, there are certain concerns, that is, with the decline in social service and public utilities that were hitherto offered by the state, that is macroeconomic development model of corporate-led globalization gives primacy to profit over social welfare, and this in turn leads to a trust deficit between the citizens and the state, as well as a trust deficit between the forces of market and the individual. Now, there are other concerns that, resources of the earth are limited. When we talk about rampant rise of forces of economics and global forces, talking about opening of the economy, talking about sky high growth, then there are issues of plundering of the resources of the earth, and there is a blame that is put on this large scale industrialization of the world economy, that is, it has led to commercialization of the biodiversity. Now, what we see here is that it is a complex picture. At one point of time, globalization in its economic dimension has led to opportunities for increasing development, jobs, national development, poverty reduction, amongst others. But at the same time, one cannot ignore the other issues wherein it has led to challenges for the policymaker. That is, opportunities have definitely come hand in hand, but at the same time, by learning, one cannot ignore the new vulnerabilities. Public opinion, therefore, about globalization and market reforms thereof is mixed. One cannot ignore the global financial and economic crisis that have also been factored in because of the unstable, or you can say volatile nature of global finances. Then concerns have been raised as to how the cost of the crisis have been often borne by the developing world, and at the same time that benefits from globalization, when we look at from the economic perspective, are not widely shared and equally available for all in the global community. When we look at global economy, we say that it is an economy of all humans of the world, characterized as international exchange of goods and services that is expressed in monetary units of account. Now, at the same time, it is very essential to point out what Adam Smith points out in the theory of model sentiments, that is, we are definitely a part of a fundamentally conflictual world. Sympathy, therefore, then seems to be constrained by geographical limits. Now, commercial interchange, commercial ties amongst these self-interested nations, therefore, can lead to sympathy on a global scale. Now, once we are looking at this idea of balancing national wealth with international peace, definitely globalization offers more to the world avenue, and nations must try to bandwagon the idea of global forces together. But at the same time, we have to see that how today concepts are completely competing with each other. At one point of time, we are talking about trade liberalization, whereas on the other side, countries are trying to employ protectionist measures in order to safeguard their economy from the not so favorable aftermath of globalization. Trade liberalization is the reverse of process of protectionism, and today in the world space, when we try to understand globalization, Trade liberalization and protectionism, the debates, the issues over it are going simultaneously, because today when a country decides that when we go forward for an ambit of trade liberalization and towards free trade, what are the costs that can be there for the grassroots people, the home population, the environment, the society, the culture, and the larger economic gain. Privatization, that is participation of private entities in business and services, transfer of ownership from the public sector or government to the private sector as well, has its own pros and cons. At one point of time, privatization offers more efficiency, it is argued, it offers more avenues of job creation, and it leads to giving more impetus to bringing more talent. At the same time, there is a debate that when we try to transfer the ownership from the public sector, are we harming the public sector, and what could be the right evidence that privatization is breeding more efficiency? So therefore, what we see here is that in the outcome of globalization, that is consolidation of various economies of the world, today these issues from trade liberalization to protectionism, from benefits and disadvantages of privatization, all are being debated. When we try to look at the economic dimension of globalization, one must also look at how international organizations like the World Trade Organization are helping international trade flow smoothly, providing an outlet for dealing with trade disputes. And in all this, other organizations like the World Bank Group and the IMF are trying to work out mechanisms in order to get countries together and enhance their participation in the world economy, because trade is an engine of growth. This creates jobs, reduces poverty, increases economic opportunities, and on the same line, World Bank Group also tries to get countries to improve their access to world economy. Also, when we look at globalization from its economic dimension, role of International Monetary Fund, that is how it monitors the financial and economic policies of its members, keeps track of economic developments on a national, regional, global basis, provides the members with macroeconomic and financial policy advice. Now, all of it, when we look at it, tells us that how today world economy is much more complex than what was there in the past. Today world economy has multiple players, wherein state is there with non-state actors, international organizations. When we look at world economy today, role of multinational and transnational organizations are also important when we look at employment, because when multinational company invests in a particular country, it creates employment opportunities, it helps the local economy, it improves the balance of payment, and above all, the taxation revenues. That is how countries that hold multinational corporations also benefit from tax revenues from the companies. So all of it tells us that how today world economy, because of these global forces, is an arena wherein today there is lot of action taking place, wherein state coexists with market, state actors are there with non-state actors, and all of it has led to advantages as well as disadvantages. Therefore, to sum up, economic globalization is about widespread international movement of goods, capital, services, technology and information, globalization of production, finance, markets, technology, organizational regimes, institutions, corporations and labor issues are all existing and evolving together with the challenges of the time. Now, once we try to understand deeper on globalization and its impact from the economic perspective, an important reference for all the learners is Globalization and its Discontents by Joseph Stiglitz. Joseph Stiglitz gives an important argument for all of us, that is, information is imperfect and markets without information are incomplete. Today, when we talk about market failures, which is of course a cause of worry for the forces of globalization to proceed forward, then at the same time, there are desirable government interventions which in principle can improve upon the efficiency of the market. Another reference which we must refer while trying to understand globalization from its economic dimension, that is The Price of Inequality, Joseph Stiglitz' work again in the year 2012. Wherein Stiglitz makes an important argument, that is, today there is growing wealth disparity and the cause of it could be rent seeking, and the end result is definitely morally wrong, not only for the society but also for the larger economy, because it hurts the productivity in the economy. Free market is good for the society if it is competitive, and he states that government need to regulate it to be beneficial. If not, powerful corporation will use the leverage to profit at the expense of the majority. So, dear learners, while trying to understand globalization in its economic dimensions, one has to see the forces, the factors that have established economic globalization, the impact of it, the positives as well as the negative. Thank you so much everyone for being with us for this lecture.